What if the explosions shaking Iran are not the beginning of a new phase of war, but the sound of an old strategy finally reaching its breaking point? What if the most important target is not the next missile site, the next command center, or even the mountain everyone is watching? Iran's ability to make decisions. Because on July 26, 2026, the battlefield appears to be changing. Not simply because American and Israeli strikes are continuing, but because the rhythm of those strikes is beginning to expose something underneath the physical destruction. A military system under pressure. A political system pulling in different directions. And a diplomatic channel that may be moving forward for exactly the same reason the explosions have not stopped. But the real story may be unfolding inside the decision-making machinery beneath it. Over the past 18 hours, and the mountain region associated with the facility known as Pekossk Mountain, Otameh, these locations appear disconnected. A ground minus for position here, a communications node there. But viewed from above, another picture begins to emerge. They are applying pressure across an entire military system. And that changes the central question. Because a campaign designed to destroy weapons looks very different from a campaign designed to prevent an enemy from reorganizing between attacks. That distinction is critical. The first strikes of a war are usually about shock. Command centers. Missile launchers. The goal is to blind the enemy and create freedom of movement. But eventually, the battlefield changes. The attacker is no longer asking, "What can we destroy? What can we prevent from recovering?" That is where suppression begins. And suppression is a different kind of war. Its personnel have spent hours preparing defensive positions. Vehicles are dispersed. Communications are shifting. The unit is transitioning from one operational posture to another. Then the strike arrives. The important point is not simply what was destroyed. It is what the timing prevented. The unit never gets the chance to settle into its next position. That is the first revelation. A modern precision strike does not always need to eliminate a force. Sometimes it only needs to interrupt its ability to become organized. A command system may survive the first attack. So the next strike goes after the relay infrastructure that keeps surviving units connected. Now the problem becomes more complicated. The military still has commanders. The commanders still have units. The units still have weapons. But the distance between them is growing. And when that distance expands, something dangerous happens. Orders begin arriving late. Reports become incomplete. Different commanders begin making different decisions. The military still exists, but its coherence begins to disappear. That is the part most people miss. The most powerful weapon in a suppression campaign may not be the bomb. It may be the uncertainty created between one explosion and the next. Now move underground, far from the burning facilities and the radar screens. Pekossk Mountain remains one of the most important pieces on the board. Iran has invested in hardened underground infrastructure designed to protect sensitive capabilities from exactly the kind of precision attack now being used against it. The mountain is the physical expression of that strategy. Go deeper. Build stronger. Survive the first strike. But here's the contradiction. The deeper a facility becomes, the more it depends on the surface. People must enter. Vehicles must move. Power must arrive. Information must travel. A fortress does not eliminate vulnerability. It changes where vulnerability lies. And that is why the area around Pekossk Mountain matters so much. The visible target is underground. The invisible target is everything that keeps the underground system functioning. This is also why the reported preparation around the mountain carries strategic weight. If the United States is positioning aircraft, tankers, intelligence assets, and supporting capabilities, The message is larger than one potential strike. It tells Tehran that the mountain may not provide permanent sanctuary, but it also creates a dangerous question. What happens if the threat of attack becomes more valuable than the attack itself? A bomb destroys something. A credible threat can change behavior before the bomb ever falls. That is where military power begins to merge with diplomacy. And this is where the story becomes much more complicated. Iran's internal military and political structure appears increasingly strained. Some commanders may believe further escalation is necessary. Others may see the same escalation as a path toward losing what remains of their military capability. One faction sees resistance as survival. Another sees restraint as survival. Both may believe they are protecting Iran, but they are no longer choosing the same strategy. That creates a new battlefield. Not between two armies, between two calculations inside one state. Look at the map again. Some Iranian units continue operating. Others appear to be holding back. Some capabilities are being exposed through active operations. Others remain concealed. The result is a strange military paradox. The more aggressively a unit operates, the more visible it becomes. The more visible it becomes, the easier it may be to target. Meanwhile, units that remain quiet preserve their options. So the campaign begins creating a selection effect. The forces most willing to escalate may become the forces most exposed to further strikes. The forces most cautious about escalation may become the forces most likely to survive. And that creates pressure inside the institution itself. The military question is no longer simply, can Iran retaliate? Who inside Iran is willing to order that retaliation? That distinction may determine what happens next. Because military capability and political authority are not the same thing. A commander can possess missiles. A unit can possess drones. A government can possess weapons. But if the chain of command cannot agree on when to use them, the weapons become strategically different. But they no longer create the same certainty. And uncertainty is exactly what a suppression campaign is designed to produce. Now zoom out again. The battlefield is no longer one mountain. American aircraft, Israeli intelligence, Iranian missile forces, IRGC communications, regional air defense systems, shipping lanes, diplomatic back channels. Every piece is connected. A strike in Iran can change calculations in the Gulf. A threat to shipping can change oil prices. A diplomatic proposal can change the timing of an air operation. And an air operation can determine whether diplomats believe they still have leverage. The question is no longer what happened at each target. The question is what the entire system is being forced to do. And that brings us to the most important contradiction of all. The explosions may appear to be evidence that diplomacy has failed. The opposite may be true. The pressure created by the strikes could be the very reason diplomacy is moving. Because negotiations rarely occur in a vacuum. They occur when leaders calculate that the cost of continuing is becoming greater than the cost of compromise. And that means the real battlefield may not be the place where the bombs land. It may be the room where someone decides whether another bomb needs to fall. Everyone thinks this war is about missiles, aircraft, nuclear facilities, and mountains. Who can still make them? Who can enforce them? And who can convince everyone else that those decisions are legitimate? Because if the American campaign has entered a true suppression phase, then the objective is no longer simply to destroy Iran's military infrastructure. It is to shape the environment in which Iran makes its next decision. Every strike creates pressure. Every surviving unit creates uncertainty. Every damaged communications node makes coordination harder. Every threatened facility forces commanders to consider whether moving assets will expose them. And every diplomatic meeting occurs under the shadow of what might happen if the meeting fails. That is the invisible battlefield. The bomb is visible. The decision is not. Consider Pekosk Mountain again. The mountain may be physically difficult to penetrate, but the strategic problem is broader than penetration depth. Even a facility buried beneath enormous amounts of rock still exists within a human system. Someone designed it. Someone built it. Someone supplies it. Someone protects it. Someone decides what happens inside. The deeper the facility goes, the more sophisticated that support system becomes. And the more sophisticated the support system becomes. This is why the mountain represents something larger than a bunker. It represents the eternal contest between concealment and detection, between protection and adaptation, between the weapon that defeated the previous defense and the defense designed to defeat the next weapon. That cycle has existed for centuries. Walls became thicker, cannons became larger, bunkers became deeper, bombs became heavier. But the modern version is moving faster. The battlefield now adapts almost in real time. One side observes. The other side learns. Then both redesign their strategy. And the next confrontation begins before the previous one has even been fully understood. Strategically, this changes the meaning of military superiority. The strongest force is not necessarily the one with the largest bomb. It may be the one that learns fastest. That is why intelligence has become as important as firepower. A bomber cannot strike what it cannot find. A missile cannot destroy what it cannot accurately locate. A commander cannot respond to an enemy he cannot understand. The weapon system is only the final step. Before it comes surveillance, then analysis, then targeting, then logistics, then execution, and after that comes assessment. Break one link, and the rest becomes less effective. That is why the current campaign is so significant. It appears to be targeting the system around the targets. But here's the danger. A strategy designed to create uncertainty can also create miscalculation. They may become more cautious, or they may become more desperate. If political factions believe their authority is collapsing, they may seek a dramatic action to restore it. That is the paradox. Pressure can produce restraint, but pressure can also produce escalation. And no intelligence service can perfectly predict which one will happen. This is where the regional dimension becomes unavoidable. Look south. The Strait of Hormuz remains one of the most sensitive pressure points in the global economy. A conflict entered on underground facilities can quickly become a conflict involving shipping. A military decision made near a mountain in Central Iran can eventually affect energy markets thousands of miles away. Tankers move. Insurance premiums change. Markets react. Governments begin calculating how much economic disruption they can tolerate. The battlefield expands without a single soldier crossing a border. That is the invisible battlefield again. The weapon is not only the missile. It is the possibility that the missile might disrupt a system far beyond its intended target. And that creates a geopolitical problem for every country watching. The United States is not the only actor calculating risk. Israel is calculating. Iran is calculating. Gulf states are calculating. China is calculating. Russia is calculating. European governments are calculating. Every capital is asking a different version of the same question. How far can this conflict go before the cost becomes greater than the strategic benefit? That question becomes even more important when humanitarian pressure enters the picture. Natural disasters do not pause because wars are happening. Military campaigns do not automatically stop because earthquakes strike. And when those two realities overlap, every military decision becomes politically more complicated. The destruction caused by combat can become difficult to separate from damage caused by natural disasters. Humanitarian concerns create pressure for pauses. But pauses can also give military forces time to recover. And recovery can change the balance that created diplomatic movement in the first place. Pressure produces negotiations. Negotiations create calls for pauses. Pauses reduce pressure. Reduced pressure can weaken negotiations. The system becomes a loop. That may be the most dangerous decision of the entire conflict, because the goal of military pressure is not destruction for its own sake. It is to change the opponent's calculation. If the opponent changes its calculation before the next major strike, the same pressure can begin producing diminishing returns. The campaign can move from coercion toward escalation. That is why timing matters more than firepower. A military can possess overwhelming capability and still face a strategic question it cannot answer with weapons. When is enough pressure enough? That question now surrounds Pekossk Mountain. If the threat of a strike is already changing Iranian behavior, does attacking the mountain strengthen the negotiating position? Or does it destroy the very diplomatic opening that the pressure created? And that uncertainty is the heart of the story. Because the mountain may be the target, but the decision about whether to strike it may be the real objective. This is also where the future of warfare begins to emerge. The next generation of conflicts will increasingly be fought through interconnected systems. Satellites will find targets. Artificial intelligence may help interpret patterns. Stealth aircraft will penetrate defenses. Precision weapons will attack hardened infrastructure. Cyber operations may disrupt communications. Economic pressure will shape political choices. And diplomacy will attempt to convert military pressure into agreements before escalation becomes irreversible. The battlefield will not disappear. It will become larger. A war may begin with an explosion in one country and end with a decision in a conference room thousands of miles away. That is why this conflict matters beyond Iran. It is becoming a test of whether modern military power can still produce political outcomes. Destroying a facility is one problem. Changing the behavior of a government is another. And the second is always harder. The question is no longer whether the United States or Israel possesses the weapons to strike. The real question is whether military pressure can produce a political decision before pressure itself creates a new crisis. Because every advantage creates a vulnerability. The bomber creates a requirement for tankers. The bunker buster creates a race for deeper bunkers. The strike creates retaliation. Retaliation creates another strike. The mountain protects the facility, but it also becomes a symbol. And symbols can make compromise harder. That is the final contradiction. The more important it may become to destroy, the more important it becomes to destroy, the more dangerous the consequences of trying may be. And the more dangerous the consequences become, the more valuable diplomacy becomes. So the explosions continue. The mountain remains underground. The diplomats continue talking. And somewhere between those four worlds, the future of the conflict is being decided, not by one bomb, but by whether pressure can force adaptation before adaptation produces escalation. The question is no longer who has the strongest weapon. The real question is who can control the chain of decisions that follows every weapon. So here's the question. Do you believe future wars will be won by the side with the most powerful weapons or by the side that can make better decisions under pressure?